Starting with the structure of your research proposal, let's see how we can assess that proposal, how we can tell a good one from a weak proposal. So if we look at your proposal or indeed your dissertation as a piece of work with 3 parts, introduction, literature review, and methodology, then we would assess it in the same way. We would look at your ability to show contribution of a well-formulated feasible research question under your introduction section. We would assess your ability to identify a particular gap in literature towards which you're going to work in your proposed study. And finally, we would assess how you're going to proceed and examine your research questions, how you're going to actually fill that gap in literature. So we're dealing with a what in terms of what it is that you're going to do. We're dealing again with a what in terms of what the others have done before you. And finally, we're dealing with a how you're going to go ahead and contribute to that line of inquiry. So let's take each of these 3 parts in turn and discussing how those parts are going to be assessed. In line with your intended learning outcomes, which can be located in the course outline, we would be looking to see first if the project proposed and indeed executed in your dissertation is specific enough. Your research aim and objectives or your question formulated through the ABC rule will provide you the necessary focus for your research. So if you've done that well, if you've followed the rule well and our instructions, you should have no problem formulating a proposal which is specific, not general, okay? So we're not looking for something along the lines of the history of accounting or the modern history of accounting. Right? We're looking for something a lot more specific than that. 1 or 2 concepts and a context. The influence of something on something else in the context of a particular context. So you need to define your terms and concepts well in your proposal. The relationship between those concepts needs to be specified. Are you looking at consequences? Are you looking at determinants? Are you looking at a relationship on equal footing or the influence of one concept on another? And finally, is your intended contribution clearly laid out in that introductory section? In part 2 of your research proposal / dissertation, if it's a dissertation that you're worrying about rather than the proposal itself, what we're interested in assessing is, does the project make a contribution to knowledge? I know we used the word contribution before in part 1, but that's a simple statement. What we're looking for in part 2 is that you link that simple statement of contribution which you've made in part 1 with the extant literature in that particular field, in the relevant field or fields of study. We would like to see that your proposal portrays the state of existing knowledge in your area of interest, that the theoretical arguments expressed by scholars before you, as well as the empirical evidence that they may bring, are also clearly illustrated in the proposal. And finally, you need to outline quite clearly and in a way that is quite obvious at the end of your literature review what the gap in that body of knowledge is, the gap that you're going to contribute to. Now, very neatly from that statement of the gap in literature, you would proceed to part 3 of your proposal, or indeed your dissertation, where you're going to show us and tell us how that gap is going to be covered. What are the basic parameters of your data collection and analysis methods to do, for example, with your research site, sample, time frame measurements of variables, approaches to data analysis, so on and so forth. There are different dimensions depending on the exact methodology you are going to employ. We're also interested to see if the proposed plan for your study is feasible, giving access to data, time available, funding occasionally, although less the case, or not at all the case, with academic dissertations, as well as research skills, your own research skills. You're not supposed to know everything about everything, to be an expert in any methodology, and it's not a statement of your performance as a student that you are not, for example, particularly skilled in doing qualitative data analysis. If you're very good at doing quantitative data analysis, if you work well with numbers and with software such as the SPSS, it would be a real shame not to employ those skills and not to display them. So choose something that is feasible, something you can realistically do, given the time available to you, given the access to data and your own research skills. But it isn't enough to just outline the data collection and analysis methods you're going to employ. You need to justify that choice in respect of research orientation, research approach, ontological and epistemological determinants of your choice of research methods, of a research design. And within those research orientation traditions, such as, for example, interpretivism or positivism, you need to provide some sort of a narrative, an evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses of the selected research design. And you'd put the weaknesses under the sort of heading, if you wish, of limitations. Don't be afraid of that particular section. Any research has limitations. It's not a statement of your ability as a student. You cannot, and no one can, design the perfect research design with absolutely no weakness whatsoever. So don't claim that you can't. You just need to be aware of what the weaknesses are and align your statements of your findings with those weaknesses. So for example, if what you chose is qualitative research design based on interpretativist methodology, you cannot claim generalizability of your findings. So you know the weaknesses of that research design and you align the claims you make about your findings with those weaknesses. You cannot claim what your research methodology cannot deliver. This is all this is about, really. Now, this is a possible proposal assessment criteria grid. It can also be applied to dissertation assessment criteria, and it could be the one we're using, or it could be another one, but it would be something similar to this, where you would have the criteria on the left-hand side, so the first column, and the sort of mark area, mark brackets on the other columns. As you can see, the first two correspond to section 1 of your research proposal and later on of your dissertation. Section 2 corresponds to literature review areas of your proposal and later dissertation, and specification of methodological assumption, description of methods, evaluation of methods, and overall feasibility of the project in section 3 of your proposal. In your dissertation, you would also have something to do with your findings, but you will also have a section on findings and your ability to discuss those findings in the light of existing literature. However, you will find that the headings on this slide bear the highest proportion of importance in your overall mark, in your dissertation as well as in your proposal. Now, in the next video, let's spend a bit of time talking about ethical considerations, which are very important to both your research proposal and your dissertation. Sometimes they make or break a proposal/dissertation. So it is very important that you take them into account, that you reflect on them, and they have, as you can see, a space in that evaluation grid. Then the last but not least aspects you should be concerned with are to do with the structure of the proposal, so making sure that your arguments follow a logical structure. And in this video we gave you, and as well as the previous ones, we gave you an idea as to what that structure should be. Integrity of the argument, in other words, do all pieces in the puzzle, all pieces you've put together in your proposal fit well with one another. Clarity of language is important as well. If you feel language, in use of English language, it can be an issue, please do use a proofreader. It would make a large, very, very large difference. And finally, the overall presentation of the proposal, just showing you cared how this proposal is going to come across. So do your best in that respect as well.